I want to get everybody together here is for us to look at how to do clash detection with ACC and how we process those so we can actually get a report of some sort. I will lead this with IHS after talking with their BIM manager are still unclear as to what exactly they want out of it. So I think this is just going to be a whatever we want it to be kind of a thing. And then hopefully we'll get some responses back. Some comments back as to whether it's good, bad, or the other. I think the main reason for this is what most people would want clash detection for, and it's just to make sure that we're checking our models, right? Between each discipline. This does present certain challenges because, there's ways that you have to set things up and processes that we have to do in order to make sure we're comparing and clashing the latest and greatest. So that being said, I want to take you through the process, and then at the end, I'll have you guys ask me some questions if you want, or if you really need to know something right away, just go ahead and jump in and ask. I think the main thing is you want to make sure that everybody has synced. It's not super important, but it's good to know that when we go to set up the copy the model into the correct folder to do the clash detection, that you have the latest and greatest. Obviously, if Josh was working on it and he hasn't saved since yesterday, Taylor saved 2 hours ago, and I just saved, and then I go ahead and publish this thing. Obviously, it's not going to have anything that Joshua worked on or Taylor. So this is kind of it's important, but not super important because, again, this is just a snapshot in time for us, right? So first thing that I do is I'll save the model to central. The next thing that you have to do is you have to go to the home menu, and you need to go to where the project is. And we're going to go ahead and we want to publish everything. So that includes, so I just went to the home menu where you open projects. I went to the Belcourt model, and went to the architecture tab where it's at. And you can see your published status is there's an update available. So I want to go ahead and do that because the latest model was published, what,
4 days ago.
So what I want to do is I really want to go in here and I want to publish latest. And so I'm going to go ahead and publish the latest on this one. Just assuming that everybody's latest and greatest is in there. I mean, we'll want to do this again when it comes closer to time. Like, for instance, I think this is something that we have to figure out as a group. But I think if we were to run this right now, it's basically has to be done for tomorrow, right? This report needs to be created for tomorrow. I think that's what Eric said, the 24th. So that being said, hopefully, Giselle, you have some people that can work on this for you, or you have time to work on this, or I can help for a little while, whatever the case may be. But we need to get through the processing of this before we can create any kind of report. And I think this report that we're going to create for now is just going to be a screenshot of the website clashes matrix, which I'll show that here in a second. But you'll see that it goes pretty fast. I mean, there's a lot of stuff, but it goes pretty quick. Even when you update the models, I'll get into that here in a second. But as this is processing, I'll go ahead and show you how the folder structure is set up. And just so you know, I tried to create this. I set it up with Autodesk to make sure I understood how things are working, but we don't really need to worry about these 4 folders. In future projects where we're doing the consume method of publishing and stuff, these will become more integral and more automatic. But for now, you'll just see we only have these 2 models in here right now. If we want to include other models, we're going to go ahead and export those as well to make sure that it's also clashing with that one. So I'll show you how to do that as part of this meeting. And the lights just turned off on me, so I must not be moving it off. Okay. So you'll notice here that there are versions, and that's important because every time we save over these, this version number will go up. So it does keep track of the different versions that we're running them from, so we can always go back and run a clash and restore one to an older model if we need to. So keep that in mind. All right. So what we want to do is I'm going to go back to REVIT, and I'm going to go to the fire protection, and I'm going to, we don't have to worry about this model. I talked with them about this. It's this model right here that we want to do our clashing to. So it looks like this one was published the 18th, and nobody's worked on it since. So the one that's on the server, let's just double check the date, make sure that it is fire protection, July 12th. So this says that the latest that this was updated was, so we're going to go ahead and overwrite these. Okay. So this one here is from July 15th. So we're going to go ahead and go copy that one as well. So I'll show you that here in a second. I just want to verify that the MEP and structural models have been published. So let's go ahead and publish this one. And then I'm going to go to the structural model, which probably there's not a whole lot going on because they just got back into it today. So once we see that these are done, I like to check and wait for them here to wait for them to finish. And then I'll also double check it on the website. So on the website, it'll also show you that these models are basically republishing, I should say. So if we go to the MEP model, you'll see here, still going, last updated July 19th. Let me refresh this screen. It should be showing that it's updating. So why is that? MEP, is it done already? July 23rd, 2024, so it should be good. So that didn't take very long. That's kind of makes me a little nervous. Okay, so this one is published. This one is not saying what it is yet, so we'll come back to that one. This one, it already said it was latest was published, so nobody's worked in this one. And we'll make sure that the architecture one is published. So this one is finished. So let's go back to the MEP model. Okay, so that one is published, good. And we'll go to structure latest published. Okay, so those are all published, we're good to go. You can see this is what I was looking for. The file was processing. So just because it says it's done in REVIT doesn't mean it's fully uploaded to the web. And the web is the most important part because those are the models that we're actually going to copy into the shared folder, which is where our coordination setup is happening, is in the shared folder. By default, when you enable model coordination, it creates teams based on REVIT models it finds in the directory, which is kind of nice. And I'll show you where those are at as well. It's not as important for today, but it will be important in the future when we do the publish with the consumed model method. All right. So I'll give this a few more minutes here. While we're doing that, let me show you guys a few things. You should all have access to model coordination in the web browser. If you don't have it open now, if you could double check that, that would be great. Keep in mind that whatever model, and I probably should have went through this at the beginning, but the model that we're actually that we can actually see here and that we want to copy is actually from you have to set it up with the publish. Oops, not that. You have to set it up with the actual publish settings of your model. So we'll go through that here real quick. So under collaboration, there is publish settings. So you would go to the publish settings menu and you have to have a named set. So I just called it NWC because I created a separate export with things turned on and off that we wanted to clash. So this is a way that you can preemptively reduce the amount of clashes, because if you know you don't need to see I don't know, windows clashing with walls, let's just say hypothetically. You could just turn walls off if you want, or windows off, technically. Now, there is a way to filter those out in the web when you're doing the clash detection as well, but it's also an extra step. So that was probably a really bad example, but you get the idea. You just turn off what you don't really want to clash to, and it reduces the amount of clashes for you. So in this case, I'm only exporting out, I'm only going to publish, sorry, NavisWorks export view. And if I was to go to that, and you also notice that it was part of a set, so it has to be part of a set in order to be able to clash detect it. So if I go to that view right here, you'll see what this 3D view looks like. And I have everything turned on and off. The topo is turned off because I don't really care about that because it's way up in the air. You know, I'm not even sure what all else I have turned off in here from MEP, or maybe I don't have much of anything turned off. Topography, it looks like it might be the only thing. Let me make sure. So it does have all the links in it. That might actually, we might actually want to uncheck this in the future so we don't get doubles. Because I think we're going to go ahead and copy those files into the clash detection coordination space folder anyway. So it should show those, and it might actually give us duplicate negatives, and that's what we're going to process. So we'll see that here in a second once we get to that point. Let's double check and see if this is all good. All right, let's go back to docs. And if you go up here and you try this and you don't have this menu with these options, let me know. I'll have to turn them on for you. All right, so this MEP one is still going. That's going to be the longest one because it's an old one. It looks like this guy is good to go. Fire protection. Of course, nobody's worked in that one. And we'll check architectural. Architectural is still running too, so wonderful. Let's give that another minute here to finish up. It doesn't take a ton of time, but it does take a little bit of time, as you can see. And part of the problem is because this project has an MEP file that is well over 1 gig in size for whatever reason. So that's going to severely slow down this publish process. You guys have any questions yet?
No, I logged in so I can see what you're seeing now.
So do you have access to these design, collaboration, and model coordination?
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
Yes.
Without that, you won't be able to get to the clashes section. So as this is working, I'm just going to give you a preview of what the clashes report looks like. Right now, it's only clashing the architecture model and the fire protection / technology model. And you can see it shows these kind of clashes here and how many of them there are. There's lots of different ways that we can filter this down, but when all is said and done, Giselle, for your project specifically, we're going to have the structure model and the MEP model in here as well. So we're going to have 2 more model clash matrix entries, and we'll be able to see how those clashes need to be processed as well. So we do need to go through this with MEP at some point. Whether or not we do that for this 30%, I don't know if we're going to have time, but they should be able to go through and run their own clashes and fix their own stuff between themselves. At this point, if there's clashes after we run through the processes, it is what it is. And we'll just submit the report and get with them after. All right, so here we go. I'm going to go ahead and show you guys how to copy these over. So it's really simple. You do it from the docs menu, and you basically come over to the 3 little ellipses over here, 3 dots, and you're going to copy it, and it's going to come up and ask you where you want to copy it to, and we're just going to share it. We're just going to copy it to the shared folder root directory. We're going to go ahead and copy that. We're going to come over here to fire protection. We're going to go to the FT model in this case, and we're going to do the same thing. So this is going to overwrite and give us a new version that we can then, the clashes will run with, and it actually starts automatically. and it does it pretty quick. And one last one, let's go ahead and do the structural model, which I believe is this guy. All right. So now that we've copied all those, you'll see those here. Once they're done, finished copying, you'll notice that here, once we go to the clashes, it'll show us here under model coordination that it is going to start clashing those new models once it senses that there's new ones in there. So you can see it's running right now. And it's not showing the other models yet, but it will when it's done running its clash. While this is doing this, you can look at settings and things like that. You can give object exclusions. This is where I was talking about either A, don't show them in the 3D model that you're publishing or the sheets that you're publishing, or this is where you can also exclude those objects, but it's not, to me, it's not super intuitive because it's all or nothing. So to me, it just feels better if you know you don't want to clash something to just turn it off in your 3D view before you publish it, I think is probably the easier way to do it. But this will let you go in here and create object exclusions. You can pick which model you want to do it from. And then it'll let you walk you through creating object exclusion rules. And then this models button just shows you which models that are in here that it's doing it on. But you can see that it's running still. So this list will also update because the MEP file is so large. I will say I have ran this once already or a couple times in testing the system out. And I think I mentioned to one or maybe at least Giselle anyway, that there's a lot of false negatives with the way that they have a background model that they link the architecture model into, and then they link that into the FT model. I guess it's because of some automation stuff that they have, but the problem with it is it's creating duplicate false negatives, and there is a panel on the wall that is duplicated and comes up with a lot of the clashes. So it's pretty easy to grab all those and dismiss them. So it drastically reduces the amount of clashes pretty quickly. But as this is kind of running here, I wanted to show you, this is pretty much, this matrix is what I think we want to screenshot and send out. Because if we export out an actual clash detection summary, they're going to see all a bunch of stuff that they don't really even care to see. It's going to show every single location, what categories, and I don't think that's what they're looking for. That's more of our internal review tool. I think what they want to see is they basically want to see this with zeros, with this gray in here, zeros as close as possible. And just keep note of what these numbers are going to be once this is done running. We'll take a quick look at it just to see. And then as we start to process these, you'll see that number drop down pretty quickly. It does a pretty good job with grouping them. So you can grab them all and dismiss them all at once, and grouping them together is very similar clashes. So that's the beauty of this system. We could use NavisWorks too, but I haven't used NavisWorks in over 15 years because usually it's a construction management tool, manager tool. It just doesn't do what we need it to do quickly. And again, like I said, we don't have a bunch of rules set up. It'd be one thing if we had a bunch of clash rules set up already, but this should work just fine. Hey, look at that, popped up. So we can kind of see here what's going on now. How this works, as you've probably been able to tell, the main model that you're clashing to is always the first one listed, and obviously it's gray because it's not going to clash it to itself. So we can see here that this IHS MEP, when clashed with the ARC model, produces this many clash groups. Okay. Mm-hmm. Same thing for this. This is the FT. No, it's a structural. So structural has, and keep in mind, this is not filtered at all. So you're going to see a ton of duplicates. A ton of duplicates and a ton of false negatives, which is a good thing because 162 isn't anything when it comes to clashes. I mean, honestly, 2000 isn't a lot either. It's when you get into that 3, 4, 5,000 range that it really becomes heavy and people will question what in the world are you guys doing, right? So just for instance, or for example, I'm going to come down here to this structural one because this should be pretty easy because it's clashing it to the architecture model, and you'll see that it brings up this 3D view and it's color coded. And if you see a bunch of options up here, you don't really have to mess with these right now. These are some of those advanced things that I'm not 100% sure the best how it can help our process yet. But basic stuff, if I just click this clash, it'll show where it is in the model. And this one isn't really showing a great view of it, but if I click, you can actually expand these clashes and it'll actually give you an element ID that you can then use. I think what this is basically saying is there's a structural wall and a architecture model wall that are over top of each other, probably because they were copy monitored, or and it could be many different things. They were either copy monitored and it was left in the model. Ideally, we probably wouldn't want this structure in our model natively. So after they copy monitor it or after they create that, we would want to coordinate with them to make sure it's okay for us to go ahead and delete it. We don't want to delete it before they know about it if it is copy monitor, because then it'll delete on their end. They do have a way to use coordination review to select it to not do that, but it's a lot easier if you ask them to unmonitor their elements of walls in our project before we do that.
Yeah, and we actually don't have any foundation walls, so in that area.
As in, when you say we, you're talking about project as a whole or in the architecture model?
Architecture model. So like, if
so there are some basic wall things. So this would tell me that it is showing that there's some clashing. Maybe it's between this wall and this wall, maybe.
Or the
it doesn't
floor,
really,
'cause the floor in the crawl space was like a 1/4 inch or like 3/8 of an inch touching the foundation wall. So I don't know if that's it.
well, there is some floors. So there's these guys. So that is showing that wall with a floor. This one is showing that wall with a floor, wherever that is. That one right there. So this one it would go away if this was joined to that, or at least brought down to it in the structural model. But this is good because this is going to tell us that all these things, we can select these and know that they're false negatives, right?
Yeah.
This one here where it's wall on wall, we're going to hold off on that one. The ones where it's floor, again, I think this is generic enough that we can just assume that it's a false negative. We'll come back to the C channel ones, and we'll come back to these guys here in a second. So let's go ahead and process these ones. So you'll see that I've checkboxed the ones that I want to process. And it's real easy to process these. We're basically going to click not an issue. And when you click not an issue, it gives you this little window over here to the side, and you're basically going to say there's model inaccuracy, minimal overlap, whatever you want to do. You can call it other, and you can put in here assumed conflicts with copy monitoring or minimal quality of model conflicts. So that at least will tell us why somebody went ahead and basically said it wasn't a real clash. So now we're down to 320. So now we can continue to go through here. Now, if there's a lot of these that for a fact, like this one, one's a wide flange with basic wall. I think it's pretty obvious that that's a false negative because we don't go through and edit our wall profiles to show. You know what I mean? A structure going through it. So those are always going to be a false negative.
Yeah.
You might still want to double check a couple of them just to see. But you can see these are inside of walls and we don't really cut those out. So more than likely all these W flanges And to be quite honest with you, it's really hard for me. I have a hard time being okay with clash detection because it's stuff like this that we know we're not going to take the time to model around it. We're not doing fabrication level models. You know what I mean? It's kind of silly, right? To me, because these are always going to be false issues. And so, which, like I said, you can see here, we're going to kill a bunch of them all at once, right?
Right.
Now, if the main ones that we really care about are like air terminals versus light fixtures, right? That's one
Mhm.
that we really would want them to run through and probably doesn't have a lot of inadvertence that don't require somebody to go into the model and fixing, right? Um, and so that's probably one of those types that um, is kind of important that we might actually show something that needs to be updated. And the nice thing about that is I'm going to find one of those types here. So when we create an issue, and the goal of this meeting or training thing wasn't to get too far into the weeds. But if you have the issues add-in installed for Revit, um, it'll actually show you these clashes in drawings or in 3D. The drawings one, it doesn't yet, but it is coming soon, apparently, according to Autodesk. Don't hold me on that, but that's what they're telling me. And it's really kind of cool because it'll open up the issues pane over here and you can select them and it'll take you right to it in the model. It's kind of cool. So this part here is taking forever just because there's a lot of them, right? I wish there was a way to select multiples at once, but I haven't been able to figure that out. But once we clean these out, you can imagine we're going to have considerably less flash in the report. The goal is to get it to zero, but the chances are of us getting it down to zero are pretty slim. Unless we dismiss them all, right? Okay, there we go. So I'm going to go ahead and say not an issue, and we're going to say valid interface. So, okay. Holy cow, we're down to 74. See how fast that went?
Mhm.
So that's really what this process is about. If, like, say this one, we know this one is with a floor, probably with another wall. Depending on what wall that is, I'm not really sure. It looks like it's clashing all of these walls to these walls potentially, or these walls to these walls. Either way, I think it's probably okay to just this channel, the C channel. Again, it's gonna interfere because it's not cutting our model. So that's the other problem is linked items can't cut the host project that they're in. So those are going to be false negatives every time unless we say, hey, steel beams, we know W's are always going to be involved with walls. So let's go ahead and remove that as an object exclusion. Um, Personally, I like to leave them in the 3D model to show here just so you can actually see them as a whole when you're going through these for context. But we pretty much know that all of these are pretty much false negatives. So we're going to go ahead and go through all this. Now that one, footing and footing, that might be a potential issue, but I don't think that's what the intent of this report is for. I think the intent is more for um, glaring issues, and we know this is a modeling thing that we just can't get around. So I'm going to go ahead and change this to valid interface. So this should be down to zero. Zero clashes. Awesome.
Mhm.
So now we can go ahead and close this one. Now let's go to an MEP one.
Do you think it'll always be like architecture going through the clashes, or could MEP go through their own?
I think MEP should probably go through their own, but
Yeah.
we need to go through them as well because in case they don't catch it,
Mhm.
it's ultimately on us to catch that stuff, right? So I would say we probably want to um, at least review them quickly. So we got rid of this one. So now this is the MEP was structured. See, to me, they should be running this one because
Yeah.
it's their file. Now, this one basically says that there's 76 of them again, and I don't know if it's just glitching or if it found more. I think it's just glitching because I don't know why I did that. What is this? That is a wide flash, wide flange with duct. Oh, so it's comparing it to duct now. This is actually a good one that we might need to keep, right? So this is probably a good one. So I'm going to go ahead and unselect these. And I want to pick, there's one with a pipe in it. So this is what they really are looking for, right? Basically, MEP modeling their things to where they don't run into a problem later. Now, I can see the argument that MEP does not locate their pipes, nor do they locate their HVAC ducts with actual dimensions because it's all diagrammatic. Otherwise, you would never be able to read it in a 1/8 inch plan. However, it does make sense to at least show that we've thought of whether or not it's actually going to be below the structure or not, right? And if it's going to fit, because as I'm looking at this, when you look down through here, you can see the only thing that's it's clashing with is that beam. It's not, it's clashing with these other beams as well, because it's going to show all these, right? All these beams are clashing with them. So I would probably group these in a way that if they were grouped this way, this one and this one, I would create an issue and we'll call it a clash. And then it wants you to pick a spot. So I'm just gonna go ahead and pick that spot. And then what that does is it creates this issue on the side and it takes a snapshot of whatever view is here. And then it also gives you the ability to assign it to people. So in this case, this is a real clash. In this case, we're gonna assign this to whoever the engineer is for mechanical. And you said that was
John.
John, right? So we're gonna go in here, John Benzel. And then we also have the option to put watchers in here. So if you want to include yourself so you can keep an eye on it and see when things are fixed and whatnot, great. If this is you said Daniel was on this, right?
Yes, he is.
I would probably add him to this as a watcher, just so he's aware of it. And then they give you the option to give comments. So I would just add a quick comment. Please lower pipe in model to avoid the structure. And I'm going to copy this because this is probably going to be one that we're going to be able to do a bunch of, right? So now I just saved it or submitted it, I should say, and we can close that X, come over here and do the same thing. Let's go down here to wide flange, and I think we can probably create an issue here, and we'll just say clash, and we'll pick a point, and we'll basically say, and like I said, this is something that they should probably do, but in this case, they're probably not going to get to it before tomorrow or before the end of the week. And so we want to assign this to John as well as Daniel. And they're going to get an email about this. So it automatically goes to them, lets them be aware. We can give them a due date. I don't know if we really want to give them one now. I'll leave that up to you and Eric, but I think you can easily go back in here and edit this after this release, right? And so I'm going to say the same thing. Please lower duct to avoid the structure. We'll submit that. And we're starting to work our way down. We're down to 120. Some of these we can probably just dismiss. So it's pipes going into foundation. Now, if I was an owner, I would want to be darn sure that even this stuff was figured out, right? So this one, I might actually, this is a tough one because I can see why they did this. Well, it just dies here. So the intent was to show it on plan that it's there, but not to change the elevation of it. This is a potential problem in the field, right? So to do our due diligence, I think I'm going to create an issue out of this one because I think that's an important thing to keep note of in the future, right? This is something that could come back. And I'll just put that in here as such. Let's go in here and specified. We're going to go to John again. And I'm going to do a watch for Daniel. And I'm going to come down here to the comments. Be aware that there is a large structural footing here that may be in conflict with these pipes. Please review and respond to this clash issue. And submit. Close that one. And that's pretty much how you go through this. And you know, the main things were how to get the models copied, what to do before you can copy them or before you should copy them. Obviously, number one, make sure you save to central. Number two, make sure everybody else is saved to central if you want. If it's been a while since the report in REVIT or on the web show that it's been a while since the publish has happened. Ultimately, it should be the longest you should have to wait is the previous Friday. But if for some reason, you know, in this case, this is just one clash detection report that they want at this snapshot in time, so it's not a huge deal. But a good practice is to make sure you have the latest and greatest models published, right? So you get those published. As soon as those are finished publishing, then you can then go and use the copy tool and copy them to the coordination space, which in this case was just the root shared folder. That will change slightly in the future. So don't hold that to all projects, but in this specific Belcourt model, that's how it's set up. And then you can come in and look at the clashes after the clashes are done. After the clash detection is ran, and the goal is to go through and process the false negatives. So we can try to get that number as close to zero as possible. And anything that is real, we're going to want to create an issue out of it to let everybody on the team be aware, or the pertinent person to be aware of that issue to go look at. And then once all that's done, once you've gone through and processed everything, I think the next thing would be, and you know, it'd be a screenshot of this, but it probably needs to go to a PDF more than likely. So, you know, I think you can actually use a snipping tool and, you know, create a new snip and come up here and do this guy, which has all the information in it with today's date. And it shows all of the active clashes. And hopefully these are at zero or very minimal. And I think that's what we'll print to a PDF and then include it in your submittals. And then there is a way to report, but it only reports issues. So again, it's a summary or detailed summary of basically what you saw over here on the side screen of the individual clashes and who it was assigned to and all that. And I don't think that's what they're looking for. The other one last thing I'll show you is you can go to the close and you can see all the ones that somebody has already processed, who did it, the date, and the reason why. And I believe you can actually open them up and you can reactivate it. I think you can go into it. Somehow you might have to actually reactivate it to go into it, to edit if you need to.